just so
Okay.
you know. Okay,
Is it
well,
is it pretty clear?
yeah, no, you're good. You're perfect.
Okay. Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, you're perfectly lit. All's good.
Okay. Awesome.
So let's start with just kind of going through how you got that documentary to focus on you and some other people in your cohort.
So with Run to the East, the documentary, actually, it kind of started off with Wings of America, which is a nonprofit organization out of Santa Fe. So they recruit Native American athletes to participate at the U.S. cross country championships, the junior cross country championships. So I was actually in contact with the director at the time, Kelly Concho Hayes, and there was a individual from Santa Fe by the name of Joe Springer who wanted to write a story in the New York Times regarding Native American athletes and the challenges that we face on the reservation, and using running as a catalyst to promote health and wellness and get to the next steps in our education. And this article came out on the day of the race. I believe we're racing in San Diego in, I think it was 2008. And somebody from New York actually picked up that article, read it. His name was Henry Liu, and he kind of got in contact with the director and wanted to follow three native athletes that were very in tune with their culture and wanting to have that success in their future. So that's kind of how I um, got involved with that documentary. Just my story being authentic, and them wanting to follow me and see what it was like to go from the reservation to school in the city, and seeing that dynamic, you know.
Yeah. So how did you get into distance running?
So I actually fell in love with running when at a very young age. The unique thing about the Pueblo communities here in the Southwest is that we culturally running is very traditional, um, and anything that we do pretty much on a traditional level involves some type of running. So I kind of fell in love with it at that early age. But we also had cross country meets between other Pueblo communities with kids ranging from 6 years old up to 12 years old. And we'll run various distances depending on their age group. So I started off, I think, like at a quarter of a mile, and then worked my way up to a mile. But that's kind of where I found the love for running. I mean, I was never that fast at a young age, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed just being out there and running. It was not until I think when I started getting into the longer distances, like the mile, is when I started really getting more competitive in the sport. I remember I got beat by, like, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds. It was the first race of the season, and I was like, I'm never gonna let anybody beat me again. And after that race, I I demolished the competition at every single meet. So I got pretty competitive at a young age. I think I was probably like 11 years old, 10 years old at the time, and tried to carry that through up until high school, and was really serious about competing at a collegiate level by my sophomore year. Yeah.
So you were talking in our pre-interview about prayer runs. What is the history and cultural significance of that experience? And do you do it alone versus in a group of people?
It can so prayer runs can either be both individual or in a group. It really depends on the goal or the activity that we're trying to fulfill. As far as being an individual, usually for myself, it's like a everyday, every morning type of thing for me, that I was told by our elders, that to get up in the morning and go for a run and pray, pray for that the day will go smoothly for everybody, that the be thankful for that the sun has risen. So stuff like that that I was taught, and also that all the good energy is out there early in the morning. So I will get up 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and run before school. Especially in high school, I would get up even earlier because I had to commute, and my mom would follow me early in the morning. So it's just being out there and being in harmony with your surroundings and the land, and just being thankful. And as far as groups or community based, we have foot races that take place, that are also part of thankfulness and prayer, and making sure that the community is gonna prosper throughout the year. So yeah, it just really depends on what's kind of going on, but individually it's an everyday thing for me.
So how have the prayers that you've been kind of repeating over the years, how have they shifted from what you were praying for when you were, say, 15, 16 to now? I mean, have they changed, or is it kind of the same prayer ingrained in your mind for a general good wealth or safety for your family and yourself?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't changed. I mean, how I was taught through my grandparents, my father, was that we pray for everyone first, and then the family, and then yourself last. So I've always kind of used my prayer in that sense all the time, making sure that the day goes well for everyone, and then finally the last thing for myself, making sure that my family, and now that I'm a father, I mean, I pray that my family is also safe. My child is going to grow up healthy and prosper as well. So I guess it kind of changed in that sense a little bit more getting at a emotional level with that, because I know I make prayers, and it's different now for me to know that I have a young child, and making sure that she gets um, a lot more opportunities than myself, and making sure that she's healthy and she grows up well, and also that I'm a good parent to her.
So let's talk about the opportunities that you hope to bestow on her that you may have seen were lacking in your childhood. I mean, the kind of the underpinnings of that documentary were that reservation life is fraught with poverty, for example. So did you feel like you were representing your experience on a reservation during that documentary? And then now that you're removed from that high school running experience, how have you felt like that has left a lasting impact on yourself and the way that you live?
So
Kind of a
with
loaded
that,
question, but
no, it's good. With that documentary, it did dive pretty well into my daily livelihood, I guess you could say. Um, as far as cultural stuff, it got into it a little bit, but not as much, because for us as Pueblo people, we're pretty private with what we do with things in a cultural sense traditionally. We try to keep that to ourselves, but there are certain things where we allow outside community to come in and participate and view what we do. But it dived pretty well, with how I grew up, how I was raised. We live multi-generational, that lifestyle. So grandparents live in the same house. My mother lived in the same house with her sisters, which is pretty much every family kind of lives that way, multi-generational, um, which can be tough at the same time because we don't have as much space, and that's where the opportunities and the lack of resources kind of come into play. The lack of infrastructure, to build homes or to build like apartment complexes for up and coming families. So that is something that I look towards as well, and how I can be a better leader in bringing those resources, especially for these younger kids, so that they can have space and grow and feel a lot more free. But it is nice to have your grandparents there all the time. But at the same time, we also need to have a little bit of sense of freeness, you know, from all that. So um, yeah.
So when you
Uh,
and your wife were deciding to split apart from the family and live slightly outside of the reservation, did you consult with the rest of your family, or was that a conversation that happened between the two of you?
so it actually happened between, yeah, the two of us, my wife and I at the time. Well, we weren't married yet, just yet. We're engaged at the time. Um, but yeah, we talked with each other, communicated why we wanted to move off. Um, it was mainly more so myself, because she is from a different reservation, different pueblo. She's from San Ildefonso, Tewa. Um, Woman up north, and I'm more central down here in the south area. But I did also communicate that with my parents, my family, that I was moving out of the home, and kind of communicated that it would be good for them to have more space as well, just because it can be stressful living with so many other individuals' bodies in the home. And I thought that it would be a good idea for them to have more space as well. And it did come at a good time too, because of COVID, less exposure to my grandparents too. So it was communicated, and yeah, we made that decision for ourselves to start our own family that way as well.
I'm sorry about your loss.
Yeah, it's been tough. There's a lot of loss this past year within the community and within the family. I mean, pretty much the community is a family, so there's, yeah, it was a lot of grievance, and yeah, people healing.
Yeah. But let's get back to you.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you see running as a way to get to college and get out of the reservation lifestyle?
um, so there's a lot of different moving parts with that. For me, you know, I actually went to a summer running camp in Colorado. It was Jay Johnson's running camp. He was a former uh, CU Boulder or CU Buff. He ran for the team, but he held a running camp. I think this was it 2005. I think I was going into my sophomore year, and I went up there because I wanted to improve as an athlete. Little did I know that they would set me up in a room that I woke up to the flat irons every morning, and the sun is just glistening off of them, and it was so beautiful that I was like, I can see myself coming here. I mean, I knew how good the program was, and I was like, I can see myself here. This is where I want to be, and this is where I'm going to work towards. And so I went back to school that fall, and I really pushed myself and started running really a lot faster, and it was just a lot more motivation and determination to get to the next level, a lot more discipline I felt in myself, and got really competitive, and it's, my attitude kind of just changed. And yeah, I just envisioned myself running for the University of Colorado, and got in contact. I think my senior year, I got in contact with the coach. I actually met him out in Durwood, Maryland. We're running. I was running with Wings again at that time, at the U.S. Junior Cross Country Championships. And after the race, I went up there and talked to him and told him that I was interested in running for him. And he had another athlete with him, and that athlete actually later on became a really good friend of mine. His name is Martin Medina. And we always joke about him saying that, oh, what is this little punk coming up here doing? You know, like, he wants to run for us. Yeah, he don't know nothing yet. And we joked about that. And I don't know, I just got a conversation going with the coach, and emailed him nonstop after that, and just showing my interest. And after, he gave me a shot and running for the team, and they reserved me a spot, and that's how I kind of got up to Colorado.
Yeah. So at the time that you were being recruited, I mean, how many other Native Americans were in the cross country and track collegiate experience? I mean, did you know any going in, or were you kind of on your own in that regard?
At that time, I feel like I was pretty much on my own, especially at a Division 1 level. There was other Native athletes that were being recruited by, I mean, junior colleges, Division 3, which to me is still a great opportunity, especially just to be able to run and continue your education. But at this level, I didn't really see anybody else. In New Mexico, I know there was other athletes out in Arizona that really um, were heavily recruited. Um, for myself, actually, I wasn't really recruited. I was more like a walk on. But I invested my time in communicating with Mark Whitmore, who's the coach at CU Boulder, and that was one of the reasons why he actually reserved me a spot. I talked to him after. I was like, "Why did you give me that opportunity?" He said, "Well, normally I get a lot of kids' parents reaching out to me, telling me why their son or daughter should run for me. But you, on the other hand, told me why you wanted to run for me. And that's the type of athlete that I want. That's that type of athlete that prospers here at the University of Colorado." So, and it was just like amazing that, I mean, he wants an individual that seeks that opportunity for themselves, that shows that they're determined to make that jump. So I was really appreciative of him and giving me that opportunity to run for him and winning. Yeah, so that was pretty awesome.
That's really cool. So, like, when you got to Colorado, because that was just somewhere that was foreign to you, I would assume, did you feel like there was any homesickness because you were suddenly out on your own without any of your parents or friends or relatives at all?
Actually, it did, but it was like a delayed onset of homesickness. My freshman year I was actually really excited to be at CU and getting the uniform, and that was like an emotional part for me, like actually having that uniform in my hands and like putting it on and looking at myself in the mirror and then being like, I actually made it. I have it. I'm here. And just being so excited. But it was my sophomore year where I actually started to get homesickness. And that fall, I think just with being so wanting to see my family and being homesick, my grades kind of fell apart that year. Um, and I remember going into academic probation for that fall semester, and it was really tough. Like I was still running okay. I was actually fighting for a varsity position. Actually, I was running varsity at that time. I redshirted my freshman year and ran varsity my second year. And yeah, it was just kind of a tough moment. Just that shock of actually like finally everything else, the excitement kind of calmed down, and then it was like finally like, oh shoot, like where am I at right now? Like who am I gonna reach out to with certain situations or challenges that I have? Like nobody really understands the mindset that I have coming as a Native American. So that was the tougher part, was my sophomore year, and kind of showed in my grades. And yeah, I had to communicate that to my family and my coach, and luckily he was really supportive too. My coach, was like a mentor to me. And that spring season, I got my grades back up and was back on track. Got out of that pickle. So yeah, it was tougher in my sophomore year.
So when you were kind of in that rut, were you talking to your coach or were you talking to a therapist? Was there a sports psychologist involved who was kind of
Um,
trying to help you work through a similar situation so that, like, although they didn't know exactly what you were working with or working against, they could kind of point you in the right direction?
so the funny thing about that, I started actually seeing sports psychologist or therapist by like my junior or senior year, I think that was. But at that time, like I didn't really know who to go to. Like I know my coach was there, and that's who I went to majority of the time. Like his door was always open, and he always had like an open door policy unless it was shut and you don't bother him. You know, he's doing his work. But anytime his door was open, I would knock and say, "Hello, Mark. I mean, like, you have a chance to talk or whatever." And it wasn't. We never talked really about running. I mean, sometimes it would be about training and how to get better, but it was mainly how to kind of face the challenges that I was kind of going through at that time, and kind of reassuring me that I was here for a purpose. You know, I'm here not only to be a good runner, but to prosper in my education. Like my education was going to be pivotal for me in my future. You know, running can well be there, but you know, you age and running tends to kind of not really be there for you in the end, but your education will. So he kind of helped me with that part, and then just kind of talking to me and seeing how I was doing. But I made frequent calls home, talking to my family, my parents, and they also reassured me of why I was there and that I worked really hard to get to that point. And I also kind of instilled a lot of my traditional life ways. I never really gave that up, but I started implementing that more. My morning runs, you know, waking up and at least going out for 3 to 4 miles, um, to go out and pray and being out there in the early mornings. So that really helped me as well. I kind of, I guess, shied away from that just because with the rigors of or the intensity of training at that level, you know, you go to practices. So I didn't really set time aside for myself in the mornings. And finally I started doing that, and I got grounded, and everything started to kind of fall back into place.
So once you were at Colorado Boulder and you were looking at the statistics and you were realizing that the majority of the people that you, for example, graduated high school with or were in high school with were not going to go to college, or they were not even going to graduate, because that number is really high. Was that on your mind that you wanted to break that stigma, or was that not something that you were considering particularly?
No, it was. I think it always was lurking in the back of my mind because for me, as far as where the community where I come from, I mean, I think out of middle school going into transitioning into high school, and I went to school on the reservation. There was about 15 students, and pretty much all of us went to high school. But out of that 15, there was probably only like four that went off to college, and only two of us that actually graduated from a university. Um, so in a sense, that was also something that I really kind of thought about too, um, when I was making that choice to go off to college. You know, I wanted to be that example for this younger generation to know that there's somebody from home that can make it up to to this level in their education or even their athletics, and hopefully that will be motivating for them too, to want to reach that or aspire to get to that goal, but even aspire for more or higher levels. So for me, that was just being that example. And coming back home, or even when I was in college, I would come back home every pretty often, during the summers. But I had an opportunity to talk to the middle school and elementary students. I was invited from one of my community members, and to talk and to be a guest speaker. And that was I just remembered that I done that and told him that, you know, aspire to be greater than I don't know, just to aspire to try to achieve more than myself is what I told him. Like I'm just an example, but you can achieve more than I can. And we come from the same place, you have the same opportunities, but reach higher than I have. Like I always try to tell kids to do better, to achieve higher goals. Therefore, then we all move forward as a people and and progress and be able to have better resources in the end. So yeah, that was also that played a role in my mind when I was in college. Is that I just wanted to be somebody that was going to bring back my knowledge and not be that statistic in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, did you ever find that the organized running environment was helping you stay on track?
So being a part of that cross country team and the friends that I made, were like, it was like a family, it was like a brotherhood, and that really helped as well. I made really good friends. Um, one of them was actually out of New Mexico. He was one of the top runners in New Mexico. I think my sophomore year. He's a little bit older than myself. His name is Matt Tebow, and little did I know, yeah, we will become really good friends. He was somebody that I always wanted to beat. In high school, he was definitely a lot much faster than I was. But when I got to Colorado and him being there, and kind of just we bonded really quickly and became really good friends. And one of our other good friends, Steve Cassica, it was like a trio, and we helped each other a lot. And I think they knew kind of what the challenges that I was facing, so they really helped me, invite me out to different things, coming over to their homes and just relaxing and chilling out, going to get dinner and talking about where I grew up, how I grew up. And Matt kind of knew a little bit about it, but I think he started to gain more insight into the challenges that I faced leading up to Colorado and the challenges that I was facing in Colorado at that time. So yeah, that structure really helped.
So,
Kind
I'm going to ask you a very broad question, and I want you to interpret it however you desire.
of.
What do you run for?
What do I run for at that time or now? I mean, it
You can
it
answer. You can answer both, or you can choose.
so what for me at that time in high school, um, my whole thing was that really pushed me to get to that next level is that we indigenous people were just as competitive, that we were just as strong, and I wanted to show that at that next level, because I always felt like there was this stigma that we were weak and that we're just deadbeat drunkards. That's the stereotype that you hear, and I wanted to beat that stereotype. I wanted to show that we were strong, we're educated, and that we could achieve goals that other the outside community does, that they can achieve. So that was what I ran for at that time, and why I chose to go to Colorado, and knew that I would be able to exemplify um, that reason, you know. And now for me, it's just nowadays when I run it, what I run for is just for that prayer, and I think why I always ran for prayer too, but now it's just kind of being in balance and being at a calm level. I'm not as competitive, and the intensity is not as high right now, just because I'm dealing with my injury. So now it's just kind of like the beast is asleep. The beast is asleep right now, and he's just kind of taking his time and kind of hibernating. So it's just kind of getting in tune with my surroundings again and just enjoying it right now.
So, what events did you run? What distances did you run at Colorado?
So I ran cross country and track. Cross country, the regular season was 8,000 meters, which is a little under 5 miles. And then you go into regionals and nationals, which is 10 kilometers, which is a little over 6 miles. So that was what I ran in cross country. As far as to track, I transitioned from 1,500 meters to the 10,000 meter. So I ran in that range. So those were my events: 1,500, 3,000 meters, the mile, 5,000 meters, and 10,000.
So how did you prepare for distance running at a collegiate level? I mean, was it different than what you were doing in high school? Was there a certain pre-race ritual that you always had? Or did you, for example, pray before you started running? Or what was
So
the thought process prior to taking off?
So in preparation, and it didn't really change too much. The only thing that changed from high school to college was the intensity and the volume of miles that I was running. And well, also the coach, their methods, methodology that each coach had was different. So that was also a little bit different. But the amount of volume that I ran versus high school, I think I was running like between 60 to 65 miles a week in high school. Transitioning into college, I increased that to 10 more miles. And by the time I was a senior and junior, I was running close to 100 to 110 miles a week. So preparation in that regards, yeah, I was running more volume. The intensity of the workouts were a lot higher. So I had to really pay attention to my recovery, implementing ice baths and foam rolling stretching. As far as race wise, it pretty much stayed the same. I'll warm up 20 minutes before my races, getting a good dynamic warm up, and obviously, yeah, I would pray it earlier in the morning because some of my races were later in the day. So yeah, that was always what do you call that? Um, Sorry, my mind's blinking right now.
No, you're good.
Um, Gosh, I can't even think of the word that I'm looking for right now. It was always a ritual. I'll just say it that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was always something that I did every morning. Or religious. It was always a religious thing that I did every morning. Just go out and pray and run before my meets. Like, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just to get out there. Yeah. So that's what I normally did. Yeah.
So when you were running over 100 miles a week, what was your diet consisting of? I mean, like calorie intake, what kind of foods were you eating?
So the funny thing, I probably should have paid more attention to what I was eating. But when I was running that much miles, I think I just kind of ate everything. The funny thing is, when I was like a junior, senior, like I moved off of campus, but I really made friends with the underclassmen, and I was like, all right, swipe me in for the food hall. So I would just like freaking eat everything, but I made sure that it was good. I mean, the carbs, the protein, making sure I had my greens, my salads, but I just pretty much ate everything at that time. I don't even know. I never really kept track. I just felt that I was satiated, and I was like, all right, I'm good. Um, but I could have probably done a little bit better with that. But the funny thing is, no matter how much I ate, I never gained weight. It was weird. Like I felt like I ate so much, but I was still a little unhealthy at that time. And I think it was just the stress of college and going to classes. But yeah, I probably should have paid more attention. I think I paid more attention before races, like making sure I did carbo load, and then that I did take my protein and kind of monitored that a little bit at that time. But as far as just my day to day, I ate and drank a lot of water. Yeah, I never really kept track. So
So what is your degree from Colorado Boulder in? And how
uh,
did it
so,
set you up for medical school?
so um, I have the dual degrees. One is in integrative physiology, also known as kinesiology. also the other one is history, and it's kind of a weird transition between the two. I actually started off with wanting to go into engineering school at the University of Colorado, so I started taking math courses, and I was like, I don't really like this. And then I like history. Maybe I want to teach that in high school for high school students. And I started taking that, and I was like, oh no, I don't really want to do this. And then I kind of segued into wanting to become a physical therapist at the time. So I started taking those prerequisites for pre-med, and I think I only had like 3 classes left to fulfill for history. So I kind of said, heck with it. I'll take those 3 classes, finished it out. And so the degree I have now, integrated physiology, really is a stepping stone for me for medical school. Like all the prereqs that I need for medical school come from that degree. And I decided to go into medical, to apply to medical school actually the past year. And thinking about the reasons why was that it would set up my family and my community to have a better opportunities, to have a doctor on the reservation that can be an asset to the community and have them feel more assured that they can have proper care as well. And that's just a small part of it. But the bigger part of it is once I get my degree, I want to be an advocate for better healthcare for indigenous communities throughout the Southwest, throughout the nation, because we have a very low quality of healthcare. And I mean, the rates, the average life expectancy in the nation is 75 years of age, and for Native Americans, it's 5 years less than that. So that's one of the reasons why I also want to go into this field, to better cater to my community and help with getting better healthcare.
I love that. I love that you've seen this void that you've grown up with, and you're striving to be the change.
Exactly. I mean, there's nobody that's a doctor in my community, and there's like less than 300 doctors, I believe, throughout Native American doctors throughout the nation. So it's lacking, especially coming from New Mexico. There's 20 tribal communities, indigenous communities throughout. There's 19 in New Mexico and 1 in Texas. So, I mean, this whole region, we have a lot of indigenous communities that when they go see a doctor, they're either misunderstood or misguided or taken advantage of. So I want to be able to break that when I get into that higher level of the medical scene,
Well, I'm
So
cheering for you.
yeah, thank you.
So, going from that underserved community to a college experience where you had every possible asset. You had dietitians, you had sports psychologists, you had athletic trainers, you had a coach who obviously cared about your physical and emotional well-being. Was that kind of a culture shock moment to now have everything right at your fingertips?
Well, not necessarily for me, like I was like I was just saying, with a lot of these therapists do not have the knowledge to know how to work with an indigenous person, just because our mindset, our viewpoints are a little bit different. What we value as as indigenous people is a lot different. So if they don't have any prior context to what it means to be an indigenous people, how we grew up, it's very hard for that therapist to help that individual, because they're in the beginning of, like, if I were to go see a therapist, the whole beginning, let's say of a month, is them learning how I think. and how I view or my perspective of my surroundings. I mean, that's a lot of lost time in actually making progress with that individual. So for me, that was more of the shock, I guess, is being misunderstood in a sense. Um, and it can be frustrating. And that's why I feel like a lot of indigenous student athletes or students in general tend to move back home because they have they don't have the people that can understand where they're coming from, and then you just get homesick and they just flee home, you know, because that's what's normal.
So,
So
how do you think that sport participation has helped you amplify the voices and the emotions and the mindsets of people like you?
you know, for me, I always use running as a way to inform, especially my community members, as well as, I mean, the youth. The youth is the biggest point, the biggest target that I have is making sure that they have the knowledge of what they might experience going into college or going into high school outside of the community. Like, you're going to face challenges where your peers, your classmates, or and your teacher are not going to understand, and how to advocate for themselves at the same time, finding the proper language and making sure that their voices are being heard and that they're being understood. So anytime that we go out for runs, you know, I will let them know, inform them like the challenges that I faced and how I handled them, and hopefully that they can find either they can use the same experience and in ways that I've handled, or they can make changes of what fit them. But to always make sure that they go out and pray as well, and knowing that their ancestors, that their people are behind them every step of the way.
So, once you graduated from college and you got involved with the American Distance Project, can you talk about how you got linked up with them and what kind of role they played in your post-collegiate life?
Yeah, so the American Distance Project is based out of Colorado Springs, run by Scott Simmons. And Scott Simmons was a former, I think it was Division III university coach at Queen's University. And I actually got in contact with him, or we met at a running clinic here in New Mexico in Santa Fe. I think I was like what was I, a junior, maybe a junior or senior in high school. And he was trying to recruit me already at that time, and I didn't know that. My high school never told me that he was trying to get in contact with me, and that's another story. But but anyway, yeah, um, I um, I was talking with him, and he said he was always wanted to coach an indigenous athlete, and we got in contact at that time, and he followed my career throughout Colorado when I ran for Colorado, and I kept meeting him at certain meets, national meets, and he was like, you gotta get in contact with me after you graduate. You gotta get in contact. I want to coach you. I want to coach you. I said, okay. So I graduated college, but I took like 8 months off. I went on the 8 month hiatus just to kind of regain my sense of strength, and mentally, physically, emotionally, because the rigors of college just kind of got the best of me, and I was just so fatigued after that. I was like, I did not have any energy to start running right now. So finally, I met him on Pearl Street. I think there was like Boulder was going on. It's a 10 kilometer race that's held on Memorial Day, and I met him randomly. I think that's Scott right there. So I talked to him, and he's like, hey, I told him, I said, hey, I'm ready to train again, and I'll be joining you guys. And he's like, okay. So I made a trip down to Colorado Springs, and I think that was that July or August, and I was running again, and I ran with the team, and I was like, hey, I like it here. Like, I like the guys, I like the group, and I think I will really fit in here. So yeah, we're excited to have you. So I made that transition. I made that move down to Colorado Springs, and was training with some of the best athletes, with them being Kenyan and Ethiopians, and made really good friends. Some of them went off to run in the Olympic Games. So I had the opportunity to train with them and learn a new mindset. And one of the things that I learned from them was patience. And I think that was something that I really lacked. It was being patient with my running, especially patient in a training run. They'd be like, "Why are you going out so fast? You know, warm up your body, warm up your spirit. You know." And we'll start off long runs like at 9-minute pace, and by the end of it, we'll finally be running like sub 6-minute pace. And that was a really good thing for me to have, was to learn my patience. You know, learn to be patient. And yeah, that's kind of how I got started with ADP, and then being a post-collegiate professional training group.
So then when you were looking at the 2016 Olympics and training with that same group of people and then getting injured, I mean, how did that change your mindset going into, I mean, seeing all of your teammates kind of prepare for that and then you not
Gosh,
being able to compete with them?
that was probably one of the toughest times of my life. Is that I was training really well, and then I ran a race as part of my training program, because I was gearing up for a half marathon in Philadelphia. This was in October of 2015. The race was going to be held on Halloween, October 31st, in Philadelphia, and I was running a cross country race in Boulder, actually the Rocky Mountain Shootout, on I think the first Saturday of October. So I ran, and I was really hitting really good times in my training and gearing up to qualify for the trials. Like my debut would have been the Olympic marathon trials, if I were to have qualified. So I ran this race in Colorado, and I was running up a hill. They call it Jawbone Hill, and it was the last part of the race, the last mile. And I just felt my quad just get super tight, and I kind of just hobbled through the finish, and I thought it was just like a muscle strain. So I started training again, and I was like, all right, I'm hitting my times, whatnot. But when Philadelphia came, there was just something different about my body that I just couldn't understand. You know, I started the race, and slowly the tightness of my quad just slowly started creeping and creeping and creeping. And I was on pace to qualify. I think we're running like 4:53-minute miles. And by the time I got to the 9th, 10th mile, my leg just was on fire. It was like somebody just took a needle and then just pulled out all the energy from my leg, and it just got so heavy. Like I was like, what the fuck is going on? You know, sorry, excuse my language, but I was so frustrated. And I just remember going through the finish line, very disappointed, looking at the time, and I was like a minute off from qualifying. And I was like, this fucking sucks. You know, I was just so pissed off. And there was like a photographer at the end of the race that was taking pictures, and he took my picture, or she took my picture, and I don't remember my expression at the time, but I saw the photos after, and just seeing how emotionally pissed off, or how I was just feeling at that time, was like I was just like sad and hurt. And I never really like to look at that photo. I see it every now and then when I look at running photos of myself online, but that was just something that I would like to forget, even though I just missed that qualifier. And then, you know, I tried to go see physical therapists after, tried to rehabilitate the injury after that race. And every time I was just encouraged by a physical therapist that it was going to get better. It was going to get better. But I started doing my own research, and I was like, this is more serious than just the muscle strength. I said, this seems like this is a nerve issue. And every time I would see these physical therapists, they would say that I was going to get better, and that they would manipulate my body and it'll feel fine, but it just was not getting better. And then the fact, like you're talking about, seeing my teammates still working out at a high intensity, like just got the better of me. You know, I didn't know what to do, and that really started messing with my emotions, messing with my mentality. And I got really depressed at that time. I got really stressed out. I was really depressed that even after people started qualifying for the trials, I didn't even pay attention to results anymore. I was just so bummed out. Like I still had the motivation to want to compete and train, but my body was just not allowing me to do that. And I think that's where me trying to continue to push, I just started hurting myself even more emotionally and mentally. And yeah, I just went into a deep depression when I was in Colorado Springs. Um, especially towards the middle of 2016 and towards the end, or at that time, like I made some pretty bad decisions with my health. And at that time, I decided to move home in 2017 to be back with family. But even that at that time still didn't help. You know, I was still hurting pretty bad.
So how old were you at
Yeah.
this time?
So in 2015, I was 24. I was 24 years old. Um, and my professional career was short lived. I think I only competed like a year and a half. But part of that year and a half, I was dealing with that injury, nerve impingement. Uh, yeah. It sucked. It still kind of sucks, but right now I found healthier ways to deal with it. And I'm still running, but not as at that high level. But I found my joy for it still, and taking my time, being gentle with myself.
So when you realized that running was going to be a short-lived part of the rest of your life, how did you refocus into something different?
So this is where my culture and my upbringing kind of comes into play. Um, when I was back in my community after several years of being home, it was in 2019 that we have elections every year for tribal officials on the traditional aspect and on the government aspect. So when I was appointed to be a tribal official on the traditional side of things, I was third in command. There's the two main leaders and then myself, and that was like an eye-opening moment for myself. Like, man, I'm in a role that I have to help keep my community safe, to make sure that our traditions and our dances, our songs are being carried out throughout the year. That's where my mindset started to change, started to shift. And that's when I started to take better care of myself, was in knowing the fact that I have the opportunity to really learn more, a deeper aspect of my cultural life ways than what I was always taught. Um, and yeah, that was very eye opening for me. I learned a lot that year, and that's when my whole viewpoint started to shift, and that's when I started to feel like I gotta care for, how am I gonna care for my youth? What am I gonna bring for them? What am I gonna give them that's gonna help them succeed? And that's when I started kind of diving into tribal leadership and tribal and leadership development. I started focusing on on finding ways to broaden that and to become a better leader. I know my language, but I started to learn it even more. The formalities. There's a lot more formal words, a lot different procedures that you must take in order to fulfill a cultural activity. So that helped me a lot. That year was becoming a tribal official, and then also I met my wife during that time later on throughout the year, and she opened my eyes up even more on my potential as an individual to be a leader and to shoot for to aspire for higher goals. And that's when we started figuring out that becoming a medical doctor would be the best role for me to have for my people. So 2019 was like a big pivotal, was a pivotal year in my life. A lot of things changed that year, and a lot of how I carried myself changed. And I applied to be a committee member for the All Public Council of Governors, which caters to every indigenous community here in New Mexico. So I have the ability to advise our governorship, our leadership, and talk with people at the federal level, people in Washington D.C. You know, so it was a big step for me.
That was like a great year.
Yeah, finding ways to get more resources for my community and for the people here in New Mexico.
So do you think that leaving the reservation life and going to a public college and then coming back, do you think that that prepared you to take on those leadership roles?
In a sense, yes, it did, because I see the challenges that I faced in college kind of helped me figure out how I needed to be purposeful in my community, and how am I going to help them navigate, I mean, these challenges that we face outside, the stereotypes, I mean, the longing to wanting to come home, the lack of resources. So it definitely, being outside, living away from the community, definitely helped reshape or kind of broaden my perspective of the world. And how does an indigenous person make it out here? You know, how should we think, and how do we kind of utilize our upbringing to be able to be as successful on the outside? So, and that's something that's a revolving conversation within our communities as well. Is like, how do we utilize our traditional life ways to be successful outside as well, and which is always tough to kind of to manage, you know.
What do you consult with the federal government on? I mean, what kind of aspects of your daily life?
Policy, tribal policy, ways to better create tribal policy, better ways to I guess fix it in a sense. You know, I mean, we're always trying to ensure that our tribal sovereignty is in place, and how we can better it, you know, being able to advocate for ourselves. So stuff like that, making sure that that health policy can cater us Native Americans as well. And that's what I was kind of going back off to, like, you know, why I want to go into the medical field, trying to be that influence. Yeah. It's kind of like a circling conversation, like it feeds off of one another. So some of my answers are kind of going to be from one answer is going to be able to answer another question.
Right.
Yeah.
So you guys seem like you're tied so tightly to the natural world. Do you still feel that connection? And what do you do in your daily life that helps foster that communication?
So every year, throughout the year, I mean, we carry out traditional activities, dances, ceremonies, and it's something that has been going on for thousands of years. I mean, per archaeological record, we've been here for centuries, but through oral tradition, we've been here for time immemorial. So, and these lifeways have been done for so many years, that it's just second nature to us, for us, how we view our surroundings, being in tune with the land, making sure that whatever we take from the land, that we give back, and that goes through ceremonies and prayer as well. And and one of the things that I wanted to touch on too, especially through COVID, we are limited in doing that, just because of this virus, and trying to keep each other safe. So that has also been a struggle and a challenge for us as indigenous communities down here. And how do we still continue to make sure that ceremonies are taking place and prayer is still being utilized, that our life way is still carrying out, because right now I can honestly say that a lot of us on the reservation are depressed, because we can't sing, we can't dance, and that was one of the ways that we get back in tune with ourselves. It was a way of relieving stress and grounding ourselves. So it's been exceptionally hard, right now, these past couple of years, with trying to be in tune again, but still going out in the morning. And I tell my parents, my brothers and family members, like, continue to go out in the morning and pray,
So how do you see
conti-
that changing as COVID restrictions are getting more lenient now and people are getting their vaccinations and the world is kind of opening up again? I mean, is that being exemplified in your daily life? I mean, do you see these restrictions kind of being lifted?
somewhat, we're now able to visit with family members now, which has been helpful. Before, we were unable to do so, and for us, in indigenous communities, we've always not necessarily relied on family, but we're very familial, and we always want to be able to talk and share stories. And now that we're starting to have that, I feel like it's slowly starting to calm down. We're starting to feel a little bit that it's starting to go in a positive direction. Being able to talk with family, being able to share stories and communicate and see one another, being able to kind of hug, and I had the opportunity to take my family, my child, back home, and to see her grandparents and great grandparents. So it has been a lot better in a sense. We're just waiting on being able to sing and gather, um, down in the village, and to dance. That's the next step. So hopefully, once we're all vaccinated, and it is getting to that point, but, yeah, once we're all vaccinated, I think we're able to start that process again.
So let's go back. I just have a quick question. When you were at Colorado and away from your family and your family setting, how were you able to practice these singing and dancing experiences away from the generational um home life that you had?
So for me, I actually was part of, a Native, student group on campus called Oyate, which means, the people, we the people. Um, and we held events. It wasn't not necessarily events that my Pueblo community did, but it was other things that we did. Like we had a like comedians come by. I don't know if you've ever heard of 1491s as a comedic group. They're indigenous, and we had them come by and do some bits, and which was really good and joyful. Getting that that res life type of laugh, you know. Also, we also had other musical performers come by as well, so that was good too, you know, to have. But for myself, like I always participated at home, so and I've learned songs, and so I would sing songs to myself. I would take drives out into the mountains and just sit there and sing, you know, try to kind of be in nature. You know, that was something that kind of helped me refocus. Um, and then I will often call my father and try to talk to him in our language and learn new words, um, and try to keep that going, you know. So that was the way I kind of continued to be involved with my traditional ways, you know. Was singing on my own, calling my dad, my grandparents, and talking in our native tongue, and still having that, even though they weren't physically there, you know, it was they're still helping me.
Absolutely.
And then waking up in the morning and going on those morning runs, those prayer runs, and that was something that I continued to hold um, throughout my time in Colorado. So I always kept that near and dear to my heart when I was there. And that still helped me kind of get through my years in at CU. Yeah.
So that concludes the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you think that I missed that you want to talk about, that you want to mention? Is there anything else that you want to talk about at all before we conclude?
Um, I guess the fact that I'm not too sure how open people are with the struggles that they face during times of challenge, like especially for me with my injury. Like I don't think I really dived into how intense that was for myself, and I'm not too sure if there's anybody else that really kind of goes into that. I mean, do they, for people that you talk to?
I mean, honestly, I have never heard the indigenous perspective. So I was really excited to talk to you because your experiences have been so different than what I've seen before. And I mean, I think I'm kind of on the wrong side of the country to be having those conversations or hearing those conversations. So the answer is no, but I doubt that you're the only one feeling like that.
Yeah. So for me, like it's always hard for me to talk about this point in my life because there was so much irresponsible choices that I made at that time. You know, I can honestly say that alcohol was not was what played a part in that. You know, I occasionally I would before this I would like, you know, go to a party and have one or two and be fine and like have fun. But when it got to this point in my life with so much depression, like that was something that I relied on to kind of get me through, and it was really tragic for me to look back at myself during that time and seeing what I put my body and my family through. I mean, and possibly also how I communicated when I was intoxicated, you know. And I just felt like at that time my voice wasn't being heard. Like I felt like I had to yell. I mean, like my parents were always there and supportive, but that was something that they were also kind of misguided about on how to support somebody that was going through a challenge in their life. Because for me, I feel like I was always taught to like be a man and to be strong, but you can only be so strong and so manly up to a certain point. And that was something that really affected me when I was in Colorado at that time. Um, like I was like, I kept telling people, I said, I can't be that strong anymore. Like being so strong and trying to push through this injury is just making it worse. And it was just that lack of compassion and understanding of what I was going through that I continued to make bad decisions. Um, staying out late, not coming home, coming home until a day or two later. And all that stress and worry that I put on my parents, like really kind of impacted me now or impacts me now. Like I sat down after finally rebuilding my emotions and getting in tune with why I was putting myself through those experiences. I finally was able to say sorry to my body, myself, my emotions, my mental being, and apologizing to myself for putting myself through that, and then being able to sit down with my family and being like, I take full accountability for what I put you guys through, and I'm sorry that I worried you. I'm sorry that I worried my younger brothers if I didn't come home, or that I was either heavily intoxicated at that time, and being emotional, being vulnerable, and I often communicated with my family too, like we got to find better ways on how to support one another. And that was something that I just kind of wanted to share because
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, that moment in my life was probably the hardest that I've ever had to deal with. Being able to compete and run at a high level, and then to all of a sudden not being able to enjoy it anymore. It was difficult. And I'm pretty sure there's other athletes that have experienced far worse injuries and probably went through some similar experience as far as how they handle their depression. But that was just how my experience and how I was handling it, and I wasn't handling it too well. um,
So
but yeah,
how is mental health advocacy worked through in the reservation lifestyle? I mean, are there resources allocated to mental health at all?
there is not, and that's one of the lack of resource that we have in our indigenous communities, is that we don't have telehealth, we don't have therapists, and this goes back to like what I was saying, like the therapists that do come out or that I did talk to did not understand where I was coming from, because there's that cultural difference. So it's really tough for a lot of indigenous people to find that help, and it's something that I've been wanting to work on with my community, because this goes for every indigenous community, but it's hard to try to push everybody to not really necessarily change their ways, but find a different perspective. How do we help an individual? How do we help them get out of this rut? you know and not many people, there are people that want to help, but they're also, it's not in a healthy way. So it's just kind of finding those resources that can educate our 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 elders. And the one thing that it comes down to that I didn't also explain is that there's so much historical trauma in our communities through colonization, and that culture change being beaten into our past generation, and it just kind of goes to generation to generation to generation. So this is a lot of generational trauma, and trying to break that cycle as well. So, and this comes back to finding those resources, finding healthy ways to deal with our traumas, and finding, just finding that support. So
So
there's a lack of it.
if there is a listener who wants to donate, I mean, what kind of are there advocacy organizations that you would like people to be directed toward to learn more about your experience or the experience that your family has been through or your neighbors have been through?
um right now, like, I know there are a lot of advocacy groups. um One of them that is trying to do a lot more work, is the Coalition to Stop uh, Violence, here in Albuquerque. Um, they're trying to work with, like, domestic violence as well, with partners, and also with individuals themselves, on how to just break that cycle, I guess. I don't know, sorry, it's just
No, you're perfectly fine.
yeah, I'm trying to think about this too. And yeah, so
I just want to make sure that, like, in telling your story, I'm giving the listeners a way to help or
yeah,
learn more. I mean, if
yeah.
there's any way that we can, like, donate to any causes that you feel passionate about, I mean, I can put links in the show notes of this episode.
um so there's a lot of up north programs, in northern New Mexico, in Table territory, called Table Women United, Native Women Lead. um Down here, like I was saying, we have the Coalition to Stop Native Violence. I mean, yeah. Gosh, I always mess up on their acronym. I'm so sorry.
You're good.
Um, I'm gonna. Um, can't remember the full acronym. I've helped them out before, but I'm so busy nowadays that I don't even know why. But yeah, there's a coalition here in Albuquerque that's shooting to stop that violence, and also missing murder Indigenous women,
Well,
here in Albuquerque. So they've been doing a lot of really good work, in promoting that, in ways to help break that trauma, to help kind of get rid of it in our communities. So that's another one. I can also shoot you a message on it, um,
yeah, if you think of
about
any
that.
more, I mean, I think your episode is coming out in 5 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, five weeks from today, your episode will come out. So if you just want to, up to that point, I mean, if you think of any more, just send me an email or just keep me
Um,
updated on any others that you can think of.
okay, so it's actually a coalition to stop violence against Native women. Um, I mean, they deal mainly with women, and making sure that they have the resources, but they also deal with the greater part of Indigenous communities. So that's something to kind of look into. Um,
Yeah.
but we also have a lot of other youth programs here in New Mexico. The Nota Begay Foundation, also Wings of America is another one. Um, Running Medicine. These are all groups that help support the youth, and making sure that they have healthy ways and healthy mindsets, build healthy mindsets.
Yeah.
Um, so, so those are all things to look into. Yeah, and then also, my wife and I, we run our own consulting agency, Zia Impact, and the Pueblo Development Commission. We have our own LLC, and we're also trying to find ways to help bring resources in for our communities throughout New Mexico.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we deal with pretty much every pueblo. My wife right now, we're working with 5 indigenous communities already. So we're trying to expand on that and make sure that we find more resources, especially through this pandemic. Yep.
Thank you so much. I will research some of those, and I'll message you or email you once this episode comes out. Like I said, it'll be 5 weeks from today.
Okay. And do you feel like it was okay, or was it a little slow?
What, your interview?
Yeah.
No, I think it was perfect. You thought it was
Okay.
slow?
I haven't done a lot of these in a while,
No,
so
you were so good.
I feel like I'm like a little tired too with the baby and everything.
No, no,
um,
you were
an-
perfect.
Another thing that I have started my consulting agency, impact consulting agency called the Native Runner. So
Yeah, I saw that.
I do workshops as well. I coach athletes and kind of giving that indigenous perspective. Um, 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 I'm trying to mold and develop good student athletes, and trying to promote health and wellness in our indigenous communities. So that's also something that I've been working on. Um, so I've actually helped a couple runners throughout the year, and continuing to try to help more and get a group. One of the things that I always envisioned doing was creating a running group, a running team to compete at the Junior Olympics, which is held like every December. So I'm trying to try to start a training group that I can get as many runners as I can from different indigenous communities, and putting a team together and make getting raising the money to help support them.
That's
So
amazing.
so that they have that experience, because I had that experience growing up, that my family supported. They're only spent their own money out of their pocket to get me to these races and to have that experience, that exposure. So that's something that I would like other athletes, young athletes, to have as well, so that that's an eye-opening experience, and they can say that they've traveled, and hopefully that it inspires them to take that next jump in their academics and sports. Yeah, to want to compete at more events like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's something that I aspire to do.
Yeah. So I'm gonna make a note of that as well. And is there any way that we can donate to that running club? I mean, is it
So
conceptualized yet, or is it still kind of in the
it's still in the works. It's something that I'm trying to work with my father with too, because he's a cross country coach on the reservation at the elementary middle school. So I've helped him a lot, and this is something that we're trying to work. And now that I have my consulting group, our agency, and also our 501c3, we're going to try to ensure that this is something to promote health and wellness for indigenous communities. And that's how we're going to try to develop it and seek funding for it, you know, um, for the betterment of our indigenous communities.
Thank you for
Yeah.
being so vulnerable with me, for answering all of the questions, and then for just promoting everything that you've been through and advocating for others not necessarily, I guess, going through what you've been through.
Yeah, I don't know that these past years, especially before 2019, were really tough. And just finding my way to climb out of that, and the love and support of my family, my wife, she played a big part in that. And now we have our little baby, and that has also been very eye-opening for me. to being a father figure and being a parent. And I had to find ways to better myself a lot more quickly and healthy. And I'm just so appreciative that she has come into our life. And everything that working on now is for her to have those opportunities, and for the next generation to have those same opportunities. So yeah, she's been wonderful, and cherish her. We love her, and yeah, so exciting for this next step in my life.
She is so loved, and I can just feel it. Like
Yeah.
you exude love.
Yeah, I love her. I just always want to squeeze her.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you
Yeah,
so
you
much
too.
for sitting down with me and working through your entire experience.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been great, and I hope this story helps other people, any individual out there
Yeah.
that's kind of going through the same situation. Yeah, inspire others as well.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.